thank you for everyone joining. I see we have actually a large group from Norway, so shout out to the Norway user group that's joined as well. Thank you guys for joining. But we're going to be actually looking at a very specific topic with inside of Power BI. So we may not eat up a full hour. It just depends on how questions go and things like that. But we're going to be looking at how you can do digital storytelling within Power BI. And this is going to be looking primarily at a lot of the new features that have come out over the last couple months. And we're going to highlight those features as we show you really an end-to-end example of how you can do digital storytelling. So the data set I'm going to use today is actually one that you might have seen me use in the past. It's not going to be an entirely new one, but we're going to do a little bit of a new take on how we can present reports and dashboards using Power BI through some of these new features that have been released. So that's some of the exciting stuff that we had to look forward to. If you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Devin Knight. I'm the training director here at Pragmatic Works. I also am a Microsoft Data Platform MVP. And I've authored several books, usually having to do with SQL Server as well. I also help run a local user group out of Jacksonville, Florida. So shout out again to my user group folks. If you attend a user group, they're really helpful. They give you a lot of great information, and it helps you network with other folks in your community. And so I run one, or help run one, local outside of Jacksonville, Florida. I also blog quite a bit at a website called devinknightsql.com. That's my personal blog, or my IT blog, I guess you can say. And just to kind of show you what I have on there, because a lot of people get a lot of good information out of it. If you are a BI consumer, then you'll really, or Power BI data consumer, or even just a Power BI developer, you'll really like what I do, I hope. I do a blog series at least once a week on all the custom visuals that are available inside of Power BI. So you can see by the name of this is the 75th week in a row that I've written about some of the different Power BI custom visuals. And so you can kind of slide down and see all the different blogs that I've written on. I do recommend when you have a moment, you don't have to do it right now, of course, take a look at my blog if you're really interested in some of those visuals. Okay, let's go back to the slides. I'm also pretty big on Twitter. I do a lot on Twitter. If you happen to be on Twitter as well, I use it a lot for being able to keep up with all the latest changes with Power BI. It's a great way to do that. You can follow me as well at Knight_Devin. Devin Knight is actually already taken by a special magician that you would not want to have your kids around. So just that's why I'm a little bit different there. I got my last name first. You can also email me later if you have any questions about the presentation. You can find me at dknight@pragmaticworks.com. Now, our focus for today is really all around, like I said, digital storytelling and some of the storytelling features that have been released recently. And so what you're actually seeing, I have a little GIF or GIF, however you like to say it, in the slide here that's showing some of the features that we're going to highlight today. And this is going to be similar to the report we're going to build out that you're seeing on the right-hand side. We're actually going to build 3 separate reports and then deploy this off as almost like a landing page that you can really interact with. And so the 4 core features that we're going to look at, and these have been released over the last 2-3 months, are called drill through, okay, which the name kind of implies what that is. It allows you to drill through into a more detailed report. We'll talk more about that. Bookmarks, which are a really neat way to kind of get snapshot views of your reports. The selection pane, which is a way to hide or show certain features of your report. And then spotlight, which is the one that you'll see here on the right-hand side. Whenever this goes gray, it's showing a spotlight of the other item. And so those are the 4 features that we're really going to cover over the next 45 minutes to an hour. And I think you're going to really enjoy these. If you haven't seen them already, it is a great way to really extend what you can do with Power BI and make it more of a storytelling tool. So well, let's start first with drill through. So drill through, this is kind of a little bit of a fuzzy screenshot here, but drill through, as the name implies, allows you to drill down to a more detailed report, typically a more detailed report. So the idea would be, I'm looking at perhaps a map like you see here in the bottom right, and I want to be able to right click on the state or the province within inside of a map and have it drill down to the city and show me all of the, through a drill through report to show me all of the cities where I have this particular instance of data occurring. And so what the drill through gives you the ability to do is do that, where I can actually right click on any of the items that are inside of my report and allow me to jump to a more detailed report where I can get deeper into the data. Now, drill through is actually very easy to apply. Drill through is a filter, and you'll see on the top image that I have here that you can enable drill through by turning on or really telling it which columns you want to have the drill through apply to. And so in this case, I'm telling it that I want to right click on a state, and when I right click on that state and select it, I want it to drill to a particular state in my other report. And so that's what this screenshot above is showing, is where you can actually tell it which field it is that you want to apply that drilling capability to. And it works automatically. It actually has some nice interactive capabilities. Whenever you use the drill through, it automatically creates a back button for you. So the idea here is whenever you go to drill through into a more detailed report, sometimes you want to go back and look at different data. A back button is actually automatically created for you. And so you'll see that as we get going through our demonstration here in a few moments. So that's one of the features. Drill through is one of the first features we're going to look at as far as how you can do storytelling within inside of Power BI. Bookmarks is probably the biggest of these features, and really bookmarks is going to integrate in with the other two features that we'll talk about next. But bookmarks is probably one of the more innovative things that have come around in Power BI in a while, and this was released last month in October. And what this feature allows you to do is essentially take a snapshot view of your report. So basically take a picture of what your report looks like at a point in time and save that snapshot as a bookmark. So they call them bookmarks. I'm going to call them bookmarks for now on, even though it feels kind of like a snapshot of a report. So you take a snapshot of your report. You can then either add new bookmarks or you can update existing bookmarks. So this is one of the nice features. I know I've worked with a lot of other tools in the past where if you make a mistake, you have to basically delete and recreate your bookmark. In this case, with this tool, you can actually update existing bookmarks by clicking on the little ellipses that you'll see to the right of the tool here. So we'll take a look at that as we get going here. You can also actually kind of animate or go through and view each of your bookmarks. You'll see there's a view button right here. And when you click on the view button, that allows you to almost go and animate or go and play through each of the bookmarks that you have. So in this case, I have quite a few bookmarks, 8 or 9 different bookmarks here. And you can use the view button to really go through and toggle through each of the bookmarks that you've created. So that's a nice feature as well. Now, bookmarks allow you to take snapshots on certain features of Power BI. Now, I'm sure this is going to be expanded. Again, the tool just came out last month. This feature just came out last month. So I think this is going to be expanded. But here's some of the things that you can create bookmarks on right now. I can create a bookmark on a slicer. Okay, so that can be either a bookmark based on what I've selected in a slicer or the type of slicer that I'm using. So you can actually have a bookmark that at one point it's pointing to a drop-down slicer, and then the other one is pointing to a selection slicer. So you can actually kind of go back and forth between the different types of slicers you want to use. You can also bookmark on a filter. So if you apply a filter to a report, you can then take a snapshot view of what the report looked like with the filter turned on. You can create a snapshot or a bookmark on in focus mode. Okay, that's been around for quite a while with Power BI, but if you're not familiar with that, that's essentially making a particular visual go full screen. You can also do bookmarks on the see data feature. So you can actually have it so you can see the data aside your report, and that's available as well, where you can create bookmarks on that. You can create bookmarks on Spotlight. So Spotlight is a feature we're going to talk about here in just a moment, but you can actually create bookmarks on Spotlight as well, where you can show an emphasis on one visual over other visuals. So you can do that. And you can also do bookmarks on sorting. So if you have sorting of a column chart or of a table, you can create bookmarks on sorting, so you can kind of actually have multiple sorts that you can toggle back and forth between in a report. So this is a really, really cool feature. This feature is core to the other features that we're going to be talking about next. You likely would not use the next set of features I'm going to show you without bookmarks. All right, so the next couple features here we'll talk about, and then we're going to get into a lot of demos the rest of our time. The next set of features we're going to talk about here are the selection pane. Now, the selection pane is basically a way for you to hide or show certain visuals or items that you've placed on your report. So if it could be an image, it could be a slicer, it could be a report table, a shape even. These features or these things that you add to your report can be turned on or turned off as far as their visibility. And that's what the selection pane does, is it allows you to either show certain values or show certain objects that you've created, or hide certain objects. So I can show or hide a column chart, or I can show or hide a map if I wanted to. So you have the ability in here to actually determine what is shown and what is hidden as your report is working. And now this is really something you're going to do quite frequently with bookmarks, because what you'll traditionally do is you'll tell it that maybe I want to hide or show a column chart and maybe an image. And then if I tell it I want to hide that, on my next bookmark, I'll tell it I want to show that. And so you can toggle back and forth between hiding and showing certain objects that are inside of your report. And you'll get a good idea of what this, how this works here in a few moments as we do our demo. And we're pretty close to our demo, by the way. The last feature here that we'll talk about before we do our demo, though, is Spotlight. Now, Spotlight, as you can kind of tell from the image on the left-hand side, puts an emphasis or highlights a certain visual above all the others. And so what you're seeing on this report is I have, if you were to look at the entirety of the report, I have a column chart here on the left-hand side. I have an image down here on the bottom. I have a slicer down here. All these are kind of difficult to see right now because the spotlight has been put on the map. And so basically the idea behind Spotlight is to emphasize certain areas of your report. Again, this is also something that you would likely do in combination with bookmarks. So with a bookmark, you can tell it that I want a bookmark to be on the spotlight that I'm looking at. And so basically it would take a snapshot of the view that we're seeing right now. And that way we can actually make it so that whenever someone goes to the report, we can have a button or something else that would indicate to turn on the spotlight, and then it would emphasize the area of the report that we want to show them. So this is another nice little feature. It's a very easy feature to turn on. Actually, all these features are pretty easy to turn on, but when you use them in combination, you really can get a lot out of them. So again, Spotlight is also something that you would likely use in combination with the bookmarks feature. All right, so let's actually get into it. What we're going to do is I'm going to go open an instance of Power BI Desktop. Before I do that, I thought I had my Zoom tool in, but I noticed it didn't actually work. So let me get that going here so we can actually see close up what I want to show you today. Let me get that out of here. Here we go. All right, so I just want to make sure I can actually zoom in for you as we start to do some of these demos, because some of these areas that I'm going to zoom in are pretty important. So I want to make sure I have that available. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I have a new blank instance of the Power BI Desktop here. I haven't done anything in here yet. And what I'd like to do to start off is I want to bring open a website, and what we're going to do is we're going to pull in some data from the web. Now, the data set I mentioned earlier is not a new one. I didn't pull out a new data set for us today, but the data set that we're going to be using today is actually going to be from a government website, from a US government website, which you can find if you go to the website explore.data.gov. Okay, so if I go to explore.data.gov, if you want to follow along later, if you're watching the recording of this, by the way, that's one of our most commonly asked questions, is this recorded? It is. You can certainly go back and find this later if you wanted to. So I'm going to go to explore.data.gov. And from this website, I'm going to search for failed banks. Okay, so I'll search for failed banks here. It's a common example. I use this data set quite a bit. It's a pretty decent one, but it also lends itself really well to what we're going to be doing with this digital storytelling session. So I'm going to go under this FDIC failed bank list. And so I'm going to play the role of working for a bank. I work for maybe a large conglomerate bank, and we don't actually often create new banking centers anymore because online banking is so prevalent now and it's so expensive to have a banking center in a particular city that I want to be very careful in choosing which city I want to add my next banking center. And so because of that, because of the expense, and because I'm going to have to put a lot of investment in this new banking center, I want to take in all of the different data points that I can when making the decision on which city to add in this new banking center. And so I have a lot of internal data sets, but I can also go out and find data sets like this and figure out where banking centers have been very unsuccessful, where banks have failed, and avoid those areas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the data set here. You can see you do have an option to download this, but the nice thing about Power BI is I actually don't even have to download it. If I wanted to, I can right click on this link and tell it that I just want to copy the link to where the download file is at. So if I right click on download and hit copy link address, I can take this back over to Power BI. Okay. And we'll go up to the Get Data section up in the top left. You guys are likely familiar with this. If you've done anything with Power BI before in the past, you likely have used the Get Data option up here. And I'm going to select Get Data and choose that I want to pull in some data from the web. I'll paste in the link that we just copied from that website a few moments ago, so you can see the link that I'm going to be using here. It's a CSV file. And then I'll choose Open or OK. When I choose OK, it's going to pop open another dialog box that points me to the data set that I'm working with, the CSV file that I'm working with, and it just kind of validates the format that it's about to pull in. In this case, it looks like the format is OK, so I'll go ahead and click Edit to bring this now into the query editor. All right, so from the query editor here, we can see quite a bit of our data that we're going to be working with. You can see it has the bank that failed, the city, the state, whatever the cert number is, acquiring institutions, so who bought the bank, when they failed, when the record was updated. So it could have been an update to the record in some cases. And in my case, I don't really care about all this data. So I can actually remove some of these columns if I wanted to. Say, for example, I don't care about the cert column. I can multi-select and select the acquiring bank and the updated date. And I'm going to remove those three columns. I don't care about those. So I'm going to right-click and remove those three. Okay. What I'd also like to do is I want to take the closing date And I just want to return back the year. It's nice that I have the dates. In fact, maybe I'll keep the date column, but I'll add in another column in here for the year. And so what I'll do is I'm going to right click on the closing date column. I'm going to duplicate this column. So I have two columns that are exactly the same. And then on this duplicated column, I'm going to transform it to just return back the year. I don't necessarily need the full date. I just want to return back the year. And I can do that by right clicking and selecting transform, year, and then I'll select year again here. Let's try that one more time. Transform, year, year. Okay. All right, so I now have two columns here. I'm going to go ahead and rename this one to just be called year. And I think I have at least an initial data set that I'd like. And I'm actually purposely making a few mistakes here that we're going to have to come back and fix, but it's part of really building out your story here. So I'm going to leave this as it is. I'm going to go ahead and rename my data set. I'm going to call this failed banks. And I'll hit close and apply. And what we'll do is we'll start to build out our first initial report. And so what we're going to do across the entire session here is we're going to build out 3 reports. One that we can kind of use to analyze the data at a higher level, one that's more at a detail level, and then a third report page that's going to be more of a landing page or a navigation page to help us get to certain areas of the report that we need. And so what I'm going to call this first one, this first page right here, forgive the zoom there acting up. I'm going to call this first page of our report, we'll call this our initial, or how about this, our summary page, summary report. Okay, so this is our summary report, and inside of our summary report, what I'd like to do is, first of all, I want to know which states have the most failed banks. And so what I can do is I can bring into my report design surface here, I can bring in something like a bar chart. And from there, I'll bring in, let's say, a count of the failed banks. So let's bring into the value section a count of the failed banks and bring it in by state. And so I can see here a count of the failed banks by state, so I can see which state has the most failed banks. I can determine that by, of course, sorting this, and I can sort it, let's say, by the count rather than the state name. And so it looks like Georgia, Florida, Illinois have the highest number of failed banks, and if we want to make this a little clearer, we could certainly come in and increase the text size here as well, so it's a lot easier to actually read those state names. I could also, if I wanted to, I can take a step further and say, let's bring in the year as a legend so we can see which years those failed banks were occurring. Okay. All right, so it's a decent looking little report here, a little visual. But let's say I also wanted to see this in a map visual. I want to see this a map that shows all of the states and the number of failed banks by state. So I can see it, of course, in a bar chart like this, but it'd really be nice to have it in a map as well. And so what I will do is I'll select in the background here, I'll click on a map to add this to our design surface. And I'm going to bring this down just a hair. I'll bring both of these down. And what I'd like to do in this is I'm going to bring in the state as the location and the number of failed banks as the size that we're looking at here. And so I told you earlier I was intentionally making a mistake, and you're actually seeing that mistake already. Hopefully you guys spot the mistake, is you're seeing that even though these are just US states here, so there's no looks like Indian provinces or anything like that, it looks like Power BI has made a few mistakes and it's actually placed a few of these values in other countries. So for example, it looks like Indiana, it placed in here as the state, the country of India. And it looks like Idaho got placed in here as some other country. And it looks like it's got, what is this one? Colorado is placed in here as, is it Colombia there? So it's got a few mistakes in here in my data. And so what I need to do is there's a few things I can do to clean this up a little bit. One of the problems is, first of all, the states that we have in here, the way that we've identified states is a little ambiguous. It's just an abbreviation. All we have in here is an abbreviation. And so it can be a little confusing to Power BI on where we're talking about, which geographic location we're talking about. So is it Colombia or is it Colorado? It's gotten confused here. And so there's a couple ways you can fix this. One of the ways you can fix this is you can go and select the column. So I can select the state column here. I can go up to the modeling ribbon on the very top here. So open the modeling ribbon on the top. And from the modeling ribbon, you can change this property here called data category. And the data category property will allow you to specify what type of field this is. So while I have the state column selected, I can change the data category here to something like the state or province. And if I do that, that will help in some ways. It'll fix a few things, but it'll also hurt in some other areas. I no longer have any dots on India or whatever else I had over here, but I do have a dot showing up on South America. And it looks like South America has a province that has an abbreviation of same as Puerto Rico here, PR. And so there's a few things I can do to fix this even more if I needed to. One of the things I can do is I can actually go back into the data set and I can make it even clearer that we're talking about US states. We're going to experience the same problem when it comes to cities. So check this out. If I were to swap out states for cities, when I swap out states for cities, notice it'll try and render this on my report. But notice it's picking up cities all over the place. It's got cities in Australia, it's got cities in Europe, it's got cities all over the place, and Canada even, it's still pulling a few of them in. And the reason why that's happening is because my cities, are a little ambiguous here. If I asked, I live in the city called Jacksonville, Florida, but there's Jacksonvilles all over the United States. And there's, for example, there's a Paris in Texas, and there's also a Paris, France. And so it's getting a little confused here on where to be able to plot out all these data points. And so we can give it a little assistance here. We can help it out a little bit because it looks like here there's a Winchester in England, and there's a Winchester probably somewhere in the Northeast as well. So what I can do is I can go back over to the query editor for just a moment, and let's fix my data set so this doesn't happen again. And then we're going to start to get some of those new features we talked about. Of course, there's a little data preparation before you can get into the new stuff, of course. So I'm going to go back over to edit queries. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a duplicate of my city and my state. So I'm going to duplicate this. So that way I'll still have a city column by itself, and I'll still have a state column by itself. But I'm going to create a new column that concatenates these two together or combines these two together. So I made a duplicate of the city and state. I can see the duplicates right here. They have the word copy at the end. And I can right click on one of those two after I've selected them. And I can tell it that I want to merge those columns together. So I can select this merge columns button right here and tell it that I want to merge them with a pretty simple little separator here, a comma and a space. And I'll call this my city state column. Okay, and hit OK. And so it's going to create a new column here for me called city state. You could have also done this in DAX as well. I could have created a calculated column in DAX that did essentially the same thing. All right, now the other thing I would want to do in here as well, remember that Colorado was showing up in the wrong area, or actually Puerto Rico was showing up in the wrong area. So what I can do as well is I can create another column here that has the state concatenated with the country. And so what I can do is I can come up here to where I see add column, and I can tell it that I want to add in a new column, a new custom column. And basically this new custom column is going to be state and country. And so what I want to have inside of this column is the state concatenated with the country name. And I don't necessarily have a column for the country name, but I do know all of the states in here are the United States. So I can actually add in here the text United States. All right, let's spell that right. There we go. So check out what this does. If I hit OK on this, it's created a couple new columns for me here. I have a city state column, and I have a state country column here. And now if I were to go back over to my report view, now that we've cleaned up my data set some, I can swap out some of these fields, and then you'll notice that it works much better now. So say, for example, I take out city, we add, or I take out state, and we add in state country. You'll notice this time that it should plot them all out correctly. At least it was supposed to, unless I made a mistake. Let's see if I made a little mistake in here. Looks okay. Let's see if city worked in here at least. Oh, it's going to act up on me now. All right, so let's see if I can bring in, I did this right before we got on our demo here together, and it worked fine. So of course it's going to mess up when I get on the call with you here. All right, I'm not going to worry too much about it. It looks like it's trying to plot it out right now. For the time being, though, I'm just going to bring in the states. I'm not going to get too hung up on that because that's not the main focus of our webinar anyways. So I can see here, though, that where we've had all of the values are brought in here now correctly. So what I want to do next is really start to work with these new storytelling features. I mentioned these storytelling features work on things like slicers, so you can do bookmarks on slicers, on filters, on all sorts of things. So I'm going to actually bring a slicer in here as well. And I'm going to apply the slicer on my state column. And I'm going to also turn the slicer into something like a drop-down selection here. So that way I can kind of select from a drop-down which state that I want to filter. And I can increase the text size of this if I wanted to a little bit as well, just so it's really clear and easy to see what the slicer is displaying. Now, the other piece of this is now that I've got a basic little report that I like, I might want to create more of a drill through report. And so again, we're doing this beginning to end. So there's a little bit of setup that we have to do here before we can get to the core of the storytelling tools. And don't worry, those are pretty quick to show. So I'm going to create another report, and this report I'll create kind of fast this time. I'll call this my drill through report. Okay, and inside my drill through report, we're going to have in here probably some maybe a more basic table so I can see the data. And let's say I want to see the city state, like so. And then let's also bring in something like the bank name. And I'm going to bring in the year that the bank failed. Okay, so I'm going to have a nice table here. I don't necessarily want to aggregate the year, so I'm going to tell it that I do not want to summarize year. That's not something that you would typically summarize in a table. So let's actually take that and tell it that I do not want to summarize year. I just want to display year. All right. So we're pulling together a nice little report. I can also, if I wanted to, take this a step further and say that I want to bring in another map, this time showing things at a city level. So I'm going to bring in another map here. We'll place the location as a city, and I'm going to bring in a count of failed banks. All right. So I've done a lot of pre-work here. I think we're ready to now talk about some of these features. Now, the first feature that I want to show you guys is drill through. Now, drill through is pretty easy to turn on. The way you can turn on drill through is all in the filter section. Okay, now if you haven't played around a lot with the filtering inside of Power BI, you'll look for filters down inside the little field well area right here. So you'll see this field well area here. If I scroll down to the bottom, in the bottom section here, there's a section devoted to filters. And so I can see here, I have visual level filters I can turn on. I have page level filters I can turn on. You have report level filters you can turn on. And then you also have drill through filters, which came out a couple months ago. And basically the idea with drill through filters is all I have to do is drag and drop a column. So I can drag and drop something like the state column onto the drill through filters area here. And what happens is when I do that, it's now going to create a new interactive report where I can actually have drill through capabilities from my first report that takes me to this more detailed report. So let me show you how this works. That's all I have to do here, by the way. Drill through is done. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to select anything here. All I have to do now is go back to my original report, my summary report. And then all I have to do is right click wherever I want. So I can either right click on the bar chart here if I wanted to. So I can right click on this and you'll see there's this drill through option now. Or I can right click on the map. So right click here and you'll see you also have the drill through capability here. Now, whenever you create a drill through report, it's going to name the drill through whatever you name your report. So in this case, I happen to name my report drill through report, but it's going to display here whatever your report name is. So again, by happenstance, I named it drill through report, so it's showing up as that here. And when I now right click on either the bar chart or a dot on my map, I can right click and tell it that I want to drill through and go to my drill through report, and it's going to launch my drill through report already filtered to the particular state that I selected. Now, there's a few issues going on here with my my map. I'm not so concerned about that, but you will note that if you look over in the report filter section here now, notice here that it is now filtered automatically to just return back to Georgia. Okay, so it's pretty cool. It's a nice little feature here that's made it easier to drill through into more detailed data. You can see that it's only showing Georgia data. If you look at my table, it's only showing cities within Georgia. So it validates that it is working correctly, although my state is kind of acting up here a little bit. Someone actually recommended that I change this from city to place. Let's try that and see. It didn't help. All right, so the other thing that you get whenever you use a drill through, anytime you enable a drill through on a report, is you automatically are provided this little button in the top left. So this is actually a nice little shape that's been added into your report that allows you to navigate backwards to your previous page. So as I was working on this report page, I can always click the back button here to take me back to the previous report page we were already looking at. The way it does that is if you, when you're in the Power BI desktop, you'll see when you hover above it that it tells you to do a control and a click to go back. If you hold down control and click here, that'll take you back to the previous report. Now, when you're inside of the, let's say, for example, I deploy this to the Power BI service. Once I deploy this to the Power BI service, I no longer have to do that control click. You just do a regular click. It's almost like it's really a button within inside of the interface for your users. The only reason you have to do a control click here is kind of like whenever you're working with your email and you have a hyperlink, and it's an email that you've created. If you want to actually test out that link, you have to kind of do the control click. That's the same idea here. When you're still inside the report view or inside the Power BI desktop, you have to do control click, and that'll take you back to the report that you had. Otherwise, yeah, whenever you deploy this to the Power BI service and users are actually interacting with it, then they just click on it once and it goes back for them. But again, the drill through works pretty nicely. If I want to see California instead, I can right click on California, go to drill through on California, and then I'm just looking now at California cities here now. Okay. All right, so that's the first thing. Drill through is pretty easy to enable. You can have multiple items that you're filtering on. So in this case, I'm just filtering based on state. But if I wanted to filter on something else, I can do that as well just by dropping another item inside the drill through filter section here. Okay. All right, so that's a pretty basic one. The drill through is nice. The next thing that I want to show you, though, is going to get a little bit more complicated. So this is where it becomes a little more fun, where we start looking at how bookmarks and the selection pane work. Now, if you haven't already, these features are actually still, some of them are still in beta, and you might not find them initially, but where you will find them is underneath the view menu. So if you're looking at your view menu and you don't see these two options here called selection and bookmarks, if you don't see those two features, it's because you might need to still turn on some of the features, the preview features that you'll find underneath the file menu. So if you've never turned on the preview features before, there's some really nice ones in there. If you go underneath the file menu, select file and options and settings, and then options again. And then if you look underneath the section here called preview features, you'll see there's a few features in here you can turn on, one of which is called bookmarks, and that's what I'm going to be showing you here in a few moments. So if you're trying to do this back on your own environment, you'll need to come turn on the bookmarking feature, the bookmarks feature underneath the preview features, underneath options. All right, now once you turn that on, though, you'll see the bookmarks new little option appear underneath the view menu. So underneath view, you'll find the selection pane, bookmark pane that are fairly new, at least they came out in October, that you can now use inside of Power BI. So if I were to select these two features, if I click on selection pane, if I click on bookmark pane, you'll notice that it starts to add these new panes inside of the Power BI desktop that we can start to work with. Now, if you remember from our slides earlier, the selection pane is used for more hiding or showing things. Okay, so you can hide something or show something based on what you have in the selection pane. Bookmarks are more like a snapshot view of my report. So I can take a snapshot of what the report looks like right now, for instance. If I hit add bookmark here, that's going to take a snapshot of what the report looks like right now. So if I click on add, it's going to create a new bookmark here. And this bookmark is, again, just basically showing what the report looks like right now. And then we can add multiple bookmarks here, changing the way this report looks like, and we can toggle back and forth between the different bookmark options that we have. Now, you can also rename these bookmarks. Obviously, it's kind of silly to call this bookmark 1. If you wanted to, you can actually rename the bookmark just by double-clicking on it. And if you double-click on it, you can rename it whatever you want. So I can call this something like initial view. So I can name that bookmark whatever I want. You can also update bookmarks. So if you make a change to what you have here and you want to change the way the bookmark looks, you can hit the little ellipses just to the right of the bookmark, and you'll see there's an update option. You can rename it or you can delete it here. Okay. All right, now let's actually show you how these things work. What I'd like to do is we have our initial view, and what I want to do is I actually want to add in some images, and I want to add in another chart. I want to make it basically where I can toggle this chart back and forth between two different views. I want to give my users the ability to be able to click on a button, and based on them clicking on a button, they can toggle back and forth between a column chart and a bar chart here, or it could be a line chart, whatever I want to do. In this case, I've set up the scenario for flipping back and forth between a column chart and a bar chart. And so what I've done is I'm going to make it so I can bring in a second version of this chart. I'm going to copy, Control-C and Control-V, and paste this chart right on top of itself. And what I'm going to do is I'm now going to flip the second version of this chart to a bar chart. Okay. So I now have two different versions of this chart sitting on top of each other. And so what I'd like to do is I'm also going to now import a couple images. And these images I've made up to look like buttons, to make it look like you can actually interact with them and work with it as if it was a button, almost like a web page. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go underneath the home section here, and I'm going to go tell it that I want to import an image. So I'm going to insert an image here. And the image that I'm going to find is the one that we're using for, or that I actually have a separate section here for. Let me go find it so you don't have to watch me dig in my files. All right, so I have a set of images here. We're actually going to use a ton of these, but the first ones that we want to use here are the bar image, our bar button, and then the second one I'm going to import is going to be the column image. And so basically I've made this so that it looks like they're buttons, and I'm going to use these buttons to be able to interact with the report. So I'll make these a little smaller, like so. And then tell you what, I'm going to stick this underneath the chart right here. And I'm going to stick this one right on top of it. All right, so they're basically sitting right on top of each other. Now, what I can do is I can tell it which one of these do I want to hide or show using the selection pane. So the selection pane over here is going to allow me to actually turn on the visibility or turn off the visibility of the charts in the images that I have. There's a little eyeball indicator next to them indicating that these are now being shown. I could tell it I want to hide everything, and if I hit hide all, notice what it does. It basically makes it look like I have a blank page. If I hit show all, of course it shows everything. But I can pick and choose if I wanted to. So I could pick and choose and say, well, I want to hide the column chart, and then I also want to hide the column image. Okay, so right now what this looks like is I have a view of my data set up so that I'm looking at a bar chart and it looks like I have a bar chart button already selected. I want to make it have the appearance that somebody could click on the column button and it would flip over to the column chart. So to do that, I would add another bookmark and I would call this my you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to update just so you can see what the update experience is like. I'm going to update my initial view to make this my initial view here. And so to update a bookmark, all you have to do is hit the ellipses next to a bookmark and click update. And so now this is my initial view. I replaced the initial view bookmark that I had with this new one that we've just made. And then what I can do is I can tell it that I want to switch this. I want to make it so that, well, I no longer want to hide the column chart. I want to show the column chart, but I want to hide the bar chart. And I want to hide the bar chart button. And so I've kind of flipped what I'm showing and hiding here inside the selection pane. So now it's showing the column chart. And I can add another bookmark here now for this instance of the view of my data. And so I can call this my column chart view, or you can call it really whatever you want. And so what I can do is I can toggle back and forth between the bookmarks. I can select my initial view, or I can go to my column chart view, and you can see that it's kind of making it an interactive tool here now, where somebody can actually work with this. They can hopefully, we're going to make it so they can click on the button here in a moment, and then it changed the way that the report looks based on their selection. But that's how bookmarks work. You can hide or show things based on what you have, and you'll notice the selection pane changes based on which bookmark we're looking at. Now let's talk about the images here for a moment. So with the images, you can actually make them control and be a control item where you can click on the image and it change the way the report works. So say for example here, I selected my column button. I can select my column button, and when I select that, you'll notice that over here on the far right, I have this format image section here. And from the format image section, you'll see there's an option where you can link your image to something else. So there's a little link image option right here where you can make it when someone clicks on that image, it does something. And so what we can do is we can turn on that link capability, expand the properties of it, and you can see you have two types of links that you can create. You can make this into a back button if you wanted to. So the default is that this would now become a back button, or I can make it where it actually jumps to a bookmark. And it can jump to a bookmark either that's on the existing page that we're looking at, or it can jump to a bookmark on another page if we wanted to. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it that I want to change this button that we're working on, the column button, to turn into a bookmark. And I want to make it so that whenever somebody clicks on this, it jumps back to the initial view. So we'll change this here and we'll say that I want to jump to the initial view whenever someone clicks on the column button. And then whenever somebody clicks on the bar button, so we'll select the bar button here now, we'll turn it on as a link, and we'll tell it that we want this also to be a bookmark that now goes to the column chart view. So what we've done here now is we've made this where it's really interactive, where we can click on things. If I hold down the control key, I can click on column, it'll flip to the column chart. If I hold down control again and click on it, it can flip back and forth between the column and the bar chart. So it makes it more interactive, where I don't have to come over here to the bookmarks view, pane and do it. I can actually use this nice little image as a button almost that we can hop back and forth between the values. All right, now that's not the only thing you can do bookmarks on. You can also do bookmarks on slicers. Remember I mentioned slicers earlier. So let's actually walk you through how you can do bookmarks on slicers. Let me launch open something here real quick, just so I can make sure I do these on the correct items. So what we're going to do slicers on this time, or a bookmark on this time, is the way we're filtering our data through a slicer. And so I'm going to make it that so that whenever we click on or select a slicer, that it saves that slicer view as a bookmark. And so say, for example, I were to select California here. I can select California from my drop-down selection. You can see it actually creates a view that only highlights and shows California. And then I can, on top of that, I can make a bookmark out of this, and I can call it my California view, or I can just call it California. I can then go and say, let's select Florida. I can go select Florida from the view here, or from the slicer, and I can tell it that I want to create a bookmark out of Florida. So I can add another bookmark here, and I can call this my Florida bookmark. And let's do a couple others. Let's do Georgia. Okay, and I'll make another bookmark. Call this GA for Georgia. And I could do a couple others here if we wanted to. Tell you what, I'll go ahead and knock these next couple out really quickly. I'm going to do one on Illinois. Add a bookmark. Call it Illinois, or at least abbreviation for Illinois. Let's do New York. And then you'll kind of see where I'm going to go with this here. Is we're going to create a nice landing page so that our users can actually select the state they want, and then it filter everything else down automatically for them based on these bookmarks that we're leveraging. All right, so I'll create two more. This one, if it'll let me rename it, there we go. This one we'll call New York, and then the last one I'll create will be for Texas. All right. Okay, so I've now have a bookmark created for each of the different filters I want. We can create more than that if we wanted to, but I'm pretty happy with the 6 we just created. And how this will work now is, of course, is you can toggle back and forth between the bookmarks if you're in the bookmark pane, or we can make it so that we can actually go to another page and we can jump to this page and go straight to the filter we want. So let me show you what I mean by that. What we're going to do is, in essence, we're going to create a landing page. And so I'm going to create another report page down here. I'm going to name it that. I'm going to call it landing page. Okay, so this will be kind of like the home page for my reports that I'm creating, and it'll make it so that this is really kind of fine-tuning the storytelling methodology here, where someone can click on certain images and then drive them to certain areas of the report. And so I'm going to even move this over to the left a little bit. So now this is my first report page. And inside this one, let me get rid of some of these things here. Inside this new report page that we've created, I'm going to import 6 different images. And so I'm going to try and do this pretty quick just to import images here rather quickly. And these images that I'm leveraging here are state flags. Okay. Oop, not a text box. And the idea of what I want to happen here is that, oop, did that one twice. I want to make it so that a user can click on the flag and it jump to the report that's relevant to them, and it jump to the view of the report that's relevant to them. And so what I can do here is I can shift things around. I'm not going to get too hung up on the formatting. I can spend a lot of time on just formatting this, but you'll kind of get the idea. I have 6 flags. I want to make it so my user can click on the flag that's relevant to them, and then it jumps over to the report view or the slicer view that's only relevant to the state that they selected. And you've already seen how to do this, by the way. You've actually seen this. All this is basically selecting the image, going over to the format image section here. Okay, so you'll see format image on the right-hand side, turning on a link, just like we did for the buttons earlier. And I'm going to tell it that I want this to be a bookmark, and the bookmark that I want it to go to is my California bookmark. And the bookmark I want this one to go to is my Florida bookmark. And the bookmark I want this one to go to is Georgia, and so on and so forth. And so I can kind of knock this out pretty quickly to make it so that a user can click on a flag and it take them to a view of the report that's relevant to the flag that they selected. And we got just 2 more here, so I'll go ahead and knock those out. Okay, but same thing, repetitive nature here. All I did was I told it that I wanted the image to link to a bookmark, and it's going to link to a certain filtered view of my data. And so how this would work now is similar to what we saw earlier. I would hold down Control. Again, you won't have to hold down Control whenever you deploy this to the Power BI service, but I can hold down Control and select something like New York here, and you'll notice that it automatically took me to my New York page. And then I can go back over to the landing page here if I wanted to, and then maybe this time I select Florida. You'll notice this time it automatically filtered to Florida. Now, one of the things that definitely feels like this is missing is, if you remember from our first example, the drill through example, we had the back button. It would be great if we had a back button here as well. And there's actually a really easy way to do that. If I wanted a back button here, just like we had on our drill through report up in the top left, you can actually copy and paste this. I can copy this back button, go back to my summary report and paste it up here as well. And you may want to change the color of this so it's a little more obvious that it exists. Some people may need to have a color that's a little bit more obvious. I'll go with purple for the time being. You can change the color of both of these if you wanted to, just to make it a little bit more obvious than this kind of off gray that Power BI likes to do. And so here's how this was going to work now. Now that I've added that back button, I can click on any one of the states. So I can click on Illinois this time. You can see I'm looking at a version of the report for Illinois. And if I wanted to, I can go and click the back button to take me right back to where I was. So I'll hold down Control, click back. That sends me back to where I was. I can go to Texas, go back. I can go to California, go back. So it makes it a very interactive report where you can finally work with this like it's true digging into the data. You can make it so that someone can really dig into the data a lot more than they probably could previously. The other thing that we haven't covered yet is a feature called Spotlight. And Spotlight's a pretty easy feature to turn on, but it's also something you would likely do in combination with your bookmarks. And so say, for example, I go back to my summary report here for a moment. And I'm going to look at the initial view that we started off with. So let me go back to my bookmarks. I'll turn off selection. So here's our initial view that we started off with. And let's say that I wanted to highlight a particular visual in the report. So we have a lot of visuals in this report now. We have 2 or 3 visuals in this report. And I want to highlight the map. I want to put some emphasis on the map itself. And if I wanted to do that, it's pretty easy to turn on Spotlight. All you have to do is you go to the top right-hand corner of your visual. So you'll see the little ellipses in the top right-hand corner of the where it says more options of your visual. If you click on that, you'll see there's an option in here called Spotlight. And if you select Spotlight, what it will do is it'll put an emphasis just on this one visual. So I can add a spotlight on this one visual. When you do that, you'll notice everything else beside it has more transparent look to it. You can see it's still there, but it's been made more transparent. And if you want to turn that off, all I have to do is click somewhere in the background of the report and it turns that spotlight off. But what we can do is we can actually make this into a bookmark. We can tell it that we want to create a spotlight on this. We can add another bookmark, and I can name this bookmark something like Spotlight. And that's our spotlight view where we're highlighting one particular visual. You can also do a bookmark on focus mode. I mentioned this earlier. You have this little in focus mode button right here. And when you select that, that basically makes this particular visual take up the entirety of the report design surface. What you can do is you can actually create a bookmark on this as well. So if I wanted a bookmark on the in focus mode, I can click add a bookmark on this and call this my focus mode bookmark. And this will allow me to now have multiple views of my report. So I can actually go back to my initial view. I can go to my spotlight. I can go to focus mode, and you can see all these little snapshots of my report are now saved in this bookmark section. And you can use things like images to leverage going and jumping to those particular bookmarks that you have. All right, cool. So I think we've got this pretty set up. One of the things I want to show you here before we move on to kind of deploying this and kind of some final questions is the view button here. You'll see underneath the bookmark section, there's a view button. And if you click on view, what it will do is it'll actually add in, if you see on the bottom here, it adds in this little play option here where we're looking at bookmark number 1 of 10. And if you see over here in the bottom right, there's a little arrow where you can arrow your way through each of the bookmarks that you've created. So it saves the bookmarks that you've worked on, and you can kind of toggle your way through each of the bookmarks through the bottom section here to be able to see each of them. So nice little capabilities that you have built in here as well when you hit the view button. When you want to be done with it, you can either click the X button to the right of the arrows, or you can click the exit button in the bookmarks pane as well. Okay. Now, when you deploy this, and I want to try and save time for a few questions, I've seen quite a few pop in here. When you deploy this, you can take what you've developed, you can hit publish, of course, in the top right. I'll go ahead and save this somewhere. I'll go ahead and save this test, that's fine. All right. Oh, I need to sign in too, geez. Slacking here a little bit, there we go. All right, so I'll get signed in, it'll ask me for my password here. Oh, I don't want to sign up, no, not that. Let's try that one more time. Now, as I'm signing in here, I want to kind of start to wrap up a little bit. We actually have many different Power BI courses at Pragmatic Works. And so you'll probably get a survey question as you end asking you if you're interested in being contacted about our Power BI courses. Please let us know. We actually have 8 different Power BI courses. We have ones focused on Power BI Desktop, which we just recently updated to have these bookmark features showing. That's actually a new update that we have coming out with our content. But I would definitely recommend, if you haven't, sign up for one of our trials where you can see what our training is all about. All right, so I have a storytelling webinar workspace I can deploy to here. So I'm going to deploy to that. And I'm going to go launch open my web browser here, and we should see in a matter of moments, if I refresh this, we should see our reports deployed out here. So we can see here our test report that we just created a few moments ago showing up. If I go ahead and launch that report, here's how you can now interact with it from, oh, I misspelled landing page there, I call it landing page. But here's how I can now interact with this from the web browser. I no longer have to do control click. I can just click on it one time. So you can see here it doesn't say control click anymore. I can click on the visuals one time. I can right click on stuff if I wanted to and go do my drill through. I can see it take me down to the California view here. I can hit the back button, one click, no control click anymore. So it makes it very interactive, very easy for you to make this something where your users can really explore and you can build out more interesting kind of storytelling visuals here. All right, so that's it as far as our demos. Let me bring up my slides, and then I will also bring up the questions here. So if you need to contact me for anything here, you can certainly find that. You can also, like I said, if you're interested in having some follow-up about our training, please let me know. We will certainly be able to follow up with you on that. So let me see some of the questions that we have here. So I see Andy asked a question for selection. So he's talking about the selection pane. Are they going to add layers to turn things on or off and make it cleaner looking to overlay? The overlay is horrible to keep stuff straight. Yeah, Andy, you're right. I'm hoping that they have some ability to have layers like that. You're kind of making your own layers by hiding and showing things, but I know what you mean. That's not exactly what you're probably looking for, but there's certainly some things that would make it a lot easier to use that selection pane. Question here was, can you change the order of bookmarks? So we had some bookmarks that we created. Can you change the order of them? Let me validate that. I think you can. Let me double check. If I wanted to move these, you certainly can. It's all drag and drop. So that was a question that John had. If I want to reorder these, all you have to do is drag and drop to resort the order of the bookmarks. That's perfect. Let's see what else we had. Another question, this is also from Andy. Are there plans to make drill through not a right click, but the behavior that you, when a value is clicked? I see. So the behavior, that's a good question, Andy. The behavior right now when you click on something is it does the cross highlighting. So you currently right now, and Andy probably already knows this, I'm just kind of sharing this with everyone else. If you click on something inside of your report, it does cross highlighting and shows how you can actually filter down other items. And you can actually edit the way this works. If you go underneath the format section, you'll see there's an option here called edit interactions. And this edit interactions button actually allows you to control what happens when you click on things. So I could make it where rather than it highlighting this, it filter this if I wanted to. So by default, it's going to kind of highlight things, or you can actually make it where it doesn't do anything at all. That might be one area that could do something like that. That doesn't exist right now. I haven't heard any news in that regard yet. By the way, I think we're probably expecting a new Power BI desktop release pretty soon. It could even be today, I don't know. The other place that could be enabled is the drill through capabilities. I could see where you can actually make it if you had multiple layers inside of a column chart or a bar chart or a map, for instance, that you could drill deeper in, and rather than drilling into the particular visual, that it actually hop over to another report. It's not there yet, but that would be a great new add that they could bring in as well. Let's see. Andy had a lot of good questions here. So another Andy question here about drill through. Does drill through work across reports in different PBIX files? So it sounds like basically the idea is I want to be able to drill through to a report that exists on another PBIX file that's not there yet. So that capability is not there yet. I haven't heard any news in that regard either, but currently that cannot be done. Another question here about bookmarks. Do the bookmarks save the data itself at the time the bookmark is created, or is it just a view of the report? It's a good question. I think the question there is basically, can it have a snapshot not just of the view of the report visuals, but also the data? So if the data gets updated, can we create a bookmark on the old data? The answer is not right now. At least that's not how it functions right now. Whenever you are creating a bookmark, it's simply just a view of the report visuals. It's not going to bookmark anything in the data itself. So that's something to keep in mind there. And then I think I am about out of time. Let me see if I can get one more questions in here. Let's see. I love the linking images to bookmarks once published to a dashboard. Can I utilize the tile view and only show the items on the landing page, or would I have to pin the linked visuals too? Yeah, good question. So this is a question from Nicole. Now, if you want to be able to use this on the dashboard, so many of you guys are familiar with how dashboards work here with inside Power BI. With inside Power BI, if you want to actually make this into a dashboard, this is simply a report right now. So Power BI considers what we've created here a report. If I want to create a dashboard out of it, you have to pin these items to the dashboard. And Nicole already knows this. I'm just kind of explaining this for everyone else. If I were to pin this to a dashboard, let's just call this new dashboard. It created a new dashboard for me here, and I can go to it. And if you click on this, it actually does not do, I think, what you're hoping it does, Nicole. What it'll do is if I click on this is it'll hop over to the report itself. Sounds like what you're probably hoping that it would do is that I can kind of have that same interaction that we saw earlier here to tell it that I want to go to a certain, basically go to a bookmark from the dashboard. And it doesn't function like that right now. I'd love to see for it to, and the good news about this, by the way, is the Power BI service gets updated weekly. Is that something they could easily bring in here that's not yet? So they could make it so that it actually jumps to a bookmark here rather than just jumping to the report itself. So hopefully a future feature there. And by the way, I would definitely recommend, if you guys have some good ideas, I've heard several of them here, is to post that in the Power BI feature area, their idea section, because they're pretty active in there. They'll actually pick up a lot of the ideas that you post in there and implement them as well. So let me wrap up on this. I'll bring my slide back up here with my contact information. You are, again, more than welcome to reach out to me if you're interested in training. The training part of the business here at Pragmatic Work is what I focus on, and we'd love to get you involved with that as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed it today. I'm going to hand it back over to Erica to close us out.
All right, thank you so much, Devin, and thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. I saw a couple people ask in the chat about a recording, and I do want to let you guys know that we record all of our sessions, and all of you will be receiving a follow-up email tomorrow that includes a link to the recording. You can also find the recording on our website at pragmaticworks.com. I usually post it a few hours after the webinar ends. So thank you again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you all for another free training session. Take care, Devin.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.